For thousands of years, the galaxy had been under the quiet control of an ancient alliance called the Council of the Strong. Its members were survivors of deadly worlds, planets where the sky could burn, the ground could crack, and predators waited in the shadows. Among them were the Gorvax, a race of tall, armored warriors who grew up in volcanic wastelands, and the Villari, sharp-minded beings from a world where poison was in the air and survival depended on constant awareness. They believed they were nature's most powerful creations, shaped by danger and time. To them, strength was everything: physical power, mental toughness, and the will to dominate. Any species that didn't evolve on such brutal worlds was seen as weak, needing protection or control. And for centuries, the Council remained unchallenged, ruling in silence, believing they had seen all that the galaxy had to offer. That belief started to break when a quiet signal came from a forgotten edge of the galaxy. It came from a small blue world called Earth. The Council's sensors had picked up old satellites and signs of growing technology. At first, they dismissed it. There were many peaceful worlds with curious life forms that never reached space. But Earth was strange. Its atmosphere was unstable. The land was full of dangerous animals, shifting climates, earthquakes, and violent weather. Yet, somehow, the species living there, humans, had survived. Not just survived, but thrived. They had crossed oceans, built cities, invented machines, and even launched themselves into orbit. And they had done it all on their own. No outside help. No ancient gifts, just determination and curiosity. This disturbed the Council. They had always thought only Deathworlders, those forged by violent worlds, could grow strong. But humans came from a death world too, one they had forgotten. The Villari sent a team of scholars to study Earth from orbit. They expected to find chaos, wars, and disorder. What they found instead was a puzzle. Humans were not just strong. They were unpredictable. Their minds worked differently. They laughed during disasters, helped strangers, and built friendships with creatures from other species. Their stories were full of courage and sacrifice. Their science advanced faster than expected. And their world, though wild, was filled with art, beauty, and creativity. The Council grew uneasy. Something about humans didn't fit their understanding. Old records were searched, and deep within their ancient archives, they found something alarming. An erased star map showing a blue world once feared and hidden by a forgotten generation of leaders. Earth had once been known, then covered up. But why? To get answers, the Council invited a human representative to visit one of their trials, a test that all Deathworlders took part in to prove strength and honor. They didn't choose a soldier or a warrior. Instead, the humans sent a biologist named Dr. Elise Rayner. She wasn't tall, didn't wear armor, and didn't bring any weapons. The Council laughed at first, but the trial began and everything changed. On the first test, a jungle filled with venomous beasts, Elise didn't fight. She studied them. She understood how they moved and where they avoided. She made a safe path using local plants, avoiding conflict completely. In the second trial, where acid rains poured, she used natural leaves as protection and built a shelter using what she had learned from observing local species. In every challenge, she survived not with brute force, but with intelligence, calm thinking, and the ability to adapt. The Deathworlders watched in silence. This was not the strength they understood. This was something else, and it scared them. After the trials, the Council met in secret. They could no longer deny what they had seen. Humans were not just another species. They had the instincts of Deathworlders, but the minds of explorers. They didn't conquer by destroying. They learned, they shared, and they grew stronger every time they were challenged. One Villari elder said quietly, "They were not shaped by their world. They shaped it." That line echoed in the minds of every council member. For the first time in their long history, they considered offering a seat to a new species. But when the invitation was sent, something unexpected happened. The human representative didn't celebrate. Instead, she stood before the council and said, "We're honored, but we do not seek to rule. We came to learn, to help, to understand." The council was silent. For so long, strength had meant control, power, dominance. But here was a species from a deadly world, with the power to rise and destroy. Yet they chose to explore, to build, and to heal. It was the kind of strength the galaxy had not seen in ages. Not the strength of fear, but of hope. And so, the Council of the Strong changed. For the first time, strength was redefined, not just by pain or survival, but by the ability to choose kindness in a cruel world. Humans took their place not as conquerors, but as reminders of what true strength could be. And across the stars, forgotten species whispered again of Earth, not as a myth, not as a threat, but as a miracle. The lost death world had returned. And this time, it brought light. For centuries, the galaxy had known peace. At least, that's what the Great Council of the Strong believed. It was a peace built on strength, dominance, and survival. Their members, the ancient Deathworlders, had survived the harshest environments in the universe, planets where everything was a threat. They had built their empires from blood and fire, shaping the stars with their might. The Council thought themselves invincible, unchallenged by any species, for no creature had ever survived a world as dangerous as their own. At least, no creature except for the ones from their own bloodlines. But everything changed when a strange signal was detected from the edge of known space. A planet, abandoned in the archives, now sending out strange communications. The Council sent its best scouts, expecting to find nothing more than an insignificant world, just another rock floating in the vast emptiness. But they were wrong. What they found was a long-forgotten place, hidden away in the deepest corners of the galaxy, a world called Earth. For some reason, it had been wiped from the star maps, its name erased from history. No one knew why. No one cared to ask. But now, it was sending out signals again, and the Council couldn't ignore it. Earth was a world of extremes. The planet's surface was filled with violent storms, earthquakes, fires, and massive predators that ruled the land. The oceans churned with beasts that could tear a ship apart in seconds. The atmosphere itself was unstable, changing with the seasons. The Council thought to themselves, "This world must be full of weaklings. It's a miracle that anything lives there." They couldn't have been more wrong. Upon closer inspection, they found that this seemingly fragile planet was home to a species unlike any they had ever seen. The humans were resilient, more than the Council had ever imagined. They survived not just the dangers of their world, but had thrived in it. The humans did not grow stronger by crushing their enemies or mastering the land with violence. They grew stronger by adapting, learning, and evolving. They built civilizations from the ground up, learning to live in harmony with their world while fighting against it at the same time. They did not conquer their planet with brute force, but with cleverness, determination, and a deep understanding of how to use the forces of nature to their advantage. The Council couldn't believe it. This was no ordinary world. The Council was unsettled. They had always believed that to survive a death world, one needed raw power, ferocity, and strength, attributes that had shaped their own people. But humans, they were different. They didn't need power in the traditional sense. They used their minds, their adaptability, their creativity. The humans didn't conquer their planet. They coexisted with it. But the Council wasn't ready to accept it. They sent an envoy, a Velari, the wisest of their kind, to study the humans up close. His name was Kavris, and he was both amazed and disturbed by what he saw. When Kavris first arrived on Earth, he was prepared for chaos. He expected to find wild, savage humans battling against the planet's dangers. But instead, he found something far more puzzling. In the middle of violent storms, humans built cities that seemed to grow out of the very earth. They didn't run from predators. They found ways to live alongside them, using their intelligence to stay one step ahead. He watched as a human team navigated through a jungle filled with deadly creatures, yet they didn't fight. Instead, they used plants, trees, and their surroundings to avoid danger. They understood their world in ways Cavers could never have imagined. This was not a world of brute strength. It was a world where survival came from understanding, patience, and collaboration. As Cavers traveled across the planet, he saw that this wasn't just a fluke. Every human he encountered had a unique way of thinking, a way of approaching problems that was unlike anything he had seen in the death worlds. They didn't just survive. They adapted to everything around them. From the freezing cold of the poles to the intense heat of the deserts, the humans had found ways to thrive. It was as if they could bend the very forces of nature to their will, not with weapons or armies, but with knowledge and creativity. The Velaryon Voy realized, with growing horror, that the humans were not just survivors. They were the true masters of their world. This, he thought, was the most dangerous species he had ever encountered. The Council, however, wasn't ready to accept this truth. They could not believe that a species from a world as violent as Earth had risen without the brutal strength that they themselves had mastered. It didn't make sense. The Council called for a great meeting to discuss Earth. Every member of the Council gathered, and their discussion grew heated. Some wanted to destroy Earth, to remove this mysterious world from existence before it could grow into something dangerous. Others wanted to understand it better, to study the humans and learn from them. The debate raged on, but Cavers, who had spent so much time among the humans, remained quiet. He had seen their potential, and he understood the truth that the Council could not see. Finally, Cavers stood and spoke, his voice calm but firm. "You are wrong," he said. "These humans are not weak. They are not fragile. They are not like us. They are stronger than we ever imagined. We believe that strength comes from power, from domination. But the humans have something else. They survive not because they are stronger than the forces of nature, but because they work with it, because they understand it. They adapt. They do not fight every battle with force. They win by being clever, by learning from every failure, by never giving up. The strength of these humans is not in their muscles or their weapons. It is in their minds, in their hearts, and in their unity." The room fell silent. The members of the Council were not used to hearing such words. For eons, they had believed that their power was unmatched. But Cavers' words struck a chord within them. For the first time in their long history, they saw a different kind of strength, a strength that came from within, from the will to survive and the ability to adapt. And for the first time, the Council realized they had underestimated Earth and its inhabitants. As the meeting ended, the Council agreed to send a new message to Earth, not of destruction, but of invitation. The humans had shown them that strength could come in many forms. The galaxy had changed that day. No longer would the Council of the Strong stand alone in their belief that power meant domination. Now they had seen the true power of Earth, a power that came not from fear or violence, but from wisdom, adaptability, and the will to live. And so, the humans joined the stars. They had shown the galaxy a new way to survive, a new kind of strength. It was supposed to be a routine mission, a simple scan of a distant star system on the edge of the galaxy. Earth scientists had no idea that they were about to make contact with something far more complex than they had ever imagined. The ship, Sovereign Horizon, had been sent to study an unexplored planet in the Ro9 system. No signs of life had been detected in the preliminary scans, and the crew was prepared for a boring few weeks of data collection and routine checks. Yet, as they drew closer to the planet, something strange happened. The sensors flickered, showing strange patterns in the atmosphere. At first, the crew thought it was just a malfunction, but the signals continued, and they were unlike anything Earth's technology had ever picked up before. The captain of the ship, Captain Elena Wells, ordered the crew to analyze the signals more closely. "I've seen strange readings before, but this "This isn't a natural anomaly," she said, her voice calm but edged with curiosity. She turned to her chief engineer, Lieutenant Gregors, who was already studying the data. "It's coming from the surface," Gregors reported, eyes wide with disbelief. "But there's no sign of any technology. It's as if it's organic." Captain Wells furrowed her brow. "Organic? You mean biological?" she asked. "That's impossible. The signals were too advanced to come from any known organic source, yet they were unmistakably alive." The decision was made. They would land on the planet and investigate further. As the Sovereign Horizon descended into the atmosphere, the crew couldn't shake the strange feeling that something was off. The planet itself was nothing like Earth. It was barren, with jagged mountains and a red sky that seemed to flicker with something otherworldly. The land was desolate, with no sign of life. At least, no visible life. As the ship touched down on the rocky surface, the crew prepared to disembark, unaware that this would be the start of something far more complicated than they could have ever imagined. As they exited the ship, the ground beneath them hummed faintly, and the air was thick with an unfamiliar energy. "Stay close," Captain Wells ordered as she led the team forward. The planet seemed to breathe around them, a strange sensation that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end. They moved cautiously, scanning the area with their equipment. That's when they saw it, an enormous structure in the distance, hidden beneath a blanket of what appeared to be metallic vines. The structure looked ancient, its surfaces covered in intricate designs that glowed faintly. "That's it," Lieutenant Gregors whispered, "the source of the signal." They approached the structure cautiously, and as they got closer, the signals intensified. When they reached the entrance, a series of lights flashed on the walls, as though the structure itself had recognized their presence. Suddenly, a low hum vibrated through the ground, and the door opened slowly, revealing an empty, dark corridor. There was no sign of any life. No alien beings, no technology, just the faint glow of the walls and the unsettling hum that seemed to echo through their bones. They hesitated at the threshold. "We need to go inside," Captain Wells said. She motioned for the crew to follow her, and they stepped cautiously into the dark hallway. The atmosphere inside was thick, heavy, and disorienting. As they ventured deeper into the structure, strange symbols began to appear on the walls, shifting and changing before their eyes. The air grew colder, and the humming grew louder, vibrating through their bodies. Lieutenant Gregors tapped his console, trying to make sense of the symbols. "These are not like anything I've seen before. They seem to be alive," he murmured, clearly perplexed. The team pressed forward, unsure of what they would find, but certain that they were being led somewhere. Finally, they'd reached a large chamber, at the center of which was a vast, pulsating orb. It was unlike anything they had ever seen, neither fully mechanical nor entirely organic, yet it seemed to exist in both worlds at once. The orb shimmered, its surface shifting and changing in mesmerizing patterns. Without warning, the orb emitted a blinding light, and the crew was thrown back. For a moment, they were disoriented, their senses overwhelmed by the intense energy that flooded the room. As the light faded, they found themselves standing in a completely different place, an alien city full of strange, towering structures that appeared to stretch into the sky. The air was alive with energy, and the ground beneath them hummed with power. The crew looked around in confusion, their surroundings completely transformed. They had gone from a barren wasteland to a thriving, futuristic city in the blink of an eye. The question on everyone's mind was the same. Where were they? And how had they gotten there? As the crew tried to make sense of what had just happened, a voice echoed through the air, deep and resonant, though no one could pinpoint its source. "You are far from your world," the voice said, its tone both welcoming and warning. "You have crossed into the realm of the forgotten." The crew froze, their hearts pounding. Who are you?" Captain Wells called out, her voice steady despite the confusion that gripped her. "What is this place?" The voice replied, "This is a place of memories, memories of a time long past, before your species even knew how to look up at the stars." The voice paused, as if considering its words carefully. "You have stumbled upon the lost legacy of the ancients, those who once ruled the stars, but who vanished into oblivion. Your kind has awakened us, and now you will learn what it means to be truly forgotten." The crew exchanged nervous glances, each person silently wondering if they had made a mistake by coming here. Captain Wells stepped forward, determined to understand. "What happened to the ancients? Why are they forgotten?" she asked, her voice firm despite the unease that gripped her. The voice responded, "The ancients were not forgotten. They chose to fade into the void. They left their mark on the stars, but they left no record. Your kind has found us, but you will only understand when it is too late." Suddenly, the city around them began to tremble, and the ground beneath their feet shifted. The once thriving city seemed to be crumbling, as if the very foundation of the place was breaking apart. The walls cracked, the sky darkened, and the humming sound grew louder, filling the crew's minds with a growing sense of dread. "We need to leave," Captain Wells ordered. "Now." The crew ran toward the exit, desperate to escape the collapsing city. But as they turned, they realized they were no longer standing in the same place. The city had shifted again, and now they found themselves back in the dark, empty corridor of the ancient structure. The door slammed shut behind them with a deafening thud. The crew stood in silence, their hearts still racing. The signals had stopped. The orb was silent. And yet they couldn't shake the feeling that they had unlocked something far bigger than they had ever intended. As the sovereign horizon lifted off from the surface of the planet, the crew looked back at the glowing structure, now dim and lifeless. The voice echoed in their minds once more, fading away into nothingness. "You will never understand. The forgotten." The planet of Zephyria was one of the most powerful and advanced in the galaxy. Its inhabitants, the Zephyrians, were known for their physical strength, advanced technology, and disciplined warriors. Their empire stretched across several star systems, and they believed their strength was unmatched. They were right, until the day they met the humans. It began with a simple mission. The Zephyrian Empire had long been curious about Earth. The primitive planet had barely made it into the galactic scene, yet something about its human inhabitants intrigued them. A scout ship, the Orcs, was dispatched to observe. It wasn't meant to be an invasion, just an observation, a study of an unknown species, but what they saw would change everything they knew about strength. The captain of the Orcs, Commander Tizarn, was a seasoned warrior. His mind was sharp, and his body, honed by years of combat, was as strong as any Zephyrian. He had led countless battles, but nothing had prepared him for the encounter with humans. He watched from his ship's hidden vantage point as humans on Earth went about their lives. No advanced technology, no great displays of physical prowess. They were small, fragile beings compared to the mighty Zephyrians. But as Tizarn observed them, something strange caught his attention. A human, no taller than a Zephyrian child, was working in the streets of a bustling city. There was nothing remarkable about the human, just an ordinary man carrying crates, his face weathered with years of hard work. But there was something in the way he moved. Despite the weight of the crates, despite the constant strain, the human never faltered. His body was covered in sweat, his muscles working against the harsh reality of his labor. Yet he never stopped. He never seemed to tire. There was no grand show of strength, no explosion of power, just pure, relentless endurance. Tizarn's curiosity grew. This was something he hadn't expected. Tizarn ordered his ship to land in a remote area, away from human civilization. He didn't understand what he had seen, but he wanted to learn more. He was confident that the humans' true strength lay in their technology. After all, their weapons had barely made a dent in the hull of the Orcs when they tried to retaliate against the ship's cloaked presence. But the human he had observed, the one carrying the crates, was a mystery. The humans, with their primitive tools and bodies, seemed weak. Yet there was a quiet strength in their endurance, something Tizarn couldn't measure or understand. Days passed, and Tizarn remained hidden among the forests of Earth, watching. He witnessed more humans, each one displaying a similar endurance. One woman, a farmer, worked in the fields under the scorching sun, hauling heavy loads of grain from the field to her barn. She staggered under the weight, but she kept going, her hands bloodied and raw from the effort. There was no fanfare, no pride in her actions, just the drive to continue, to push forward, to survive. And then, Tizarn saw it, the moment that would haunt him. He had been watching from a distance when an accident occurred. A group of humans had been attempting to move a large metal beam across a construction site. The beam, far too heavy for a single human to lift, slipped and crashed down on one of the workers. The man's screams filled the air as he was pinned beneath the weight of the beam. The others scrambled to help, but it was clear they couldn't lift it. The odds were against them. Yet, when one man, the same man who had been carrying crates earlier, saw his friend in danger, he did something that shook Tizarn to his core. Without hesitation, he ran to the beam. His face twisted in pain, but there was no fear, no hesitation. With a grunt, he dug his fingers into the beam and began to pull. It was impossible. Tizarn knew it was impossible. A human body, even with the best training, couldn't move a beam of that size, but somehow, this man was doing it. Inch by inch, he lifted the beam, despite the impossibility of the task. His muscles strained, his bones creaked under the pressure, but he kept pushing. It wasn't just physical strength, it was something deeper, something primal. It was the strength of will, the refusal to give up. The humans around him shouted in disbelief, urging him to stop, telling him it was futile. But he kept going. With a final, guttural scream, the man threw the beam off his friend, saving him. The humans cheered, rushing to thank him. But the man collapsed to his knees, utterly exhausted, blood dripping from his hands. He hadn't done it for glory or recognition. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. And in that moment, Tizarn understood. The Zephyrians had always believed that strength was defined by power, by physical might, by technology. They believed that the greatest warriors were those who could destroy, who could overpower their enemies. But the humans had a different kind of strength. It wasn't in their size, their weapons, or their technology. It was in their hearts, in their determination, and in their refusal to quit. This was something Tizarn couldn't measure, something his advanced sensors could never detect. The days that followed were filled with quiet reflection. Tizarn, the mighty warrior, found himself questioning everything he had ever known about strength. He began to observe the humans more closely, seeing them not as weak, but as something far more complex. They didn't just fight to win. They fought to survive, to protect one another, to endure. And that, Tizarn realized, was the true strength of the species, what they were willing to do for each other, no matter the cost. Eventually, the time came for the Orcs to leave Earth. Tizarn ordered his crew to prepare for departure, but as they ascended into the sky, he felt a strange sense of loss. He had seen many planets, met many civilizations, but none had left an impression on him like Earth had. The Zephyrians would never understand the strength of the humans, but Tizarn now knew the truth. Strength wasn't always about power. It was about resilience, about pushing through when the odds were against you, about fighting for something greater than yourself. As the Orcs left Earth's atmosphere, Tizarn made a vow to himself. The Zephyrians might be the most powerful species in the galaxy, but they had a lesson to learn from the humans, and when the time came for them to face their greatest challenge, he hoped they would find the strength to endure, not through sheer force, but through the quiet, unyielding power of the human spirit. The Council of the Galactic Alliance had long been composed of the strongest and most influential species in the galaxy. For centuries, they had shared power, made decisions, and decided the fate of many civilizations across the stars. Among them were the massive Urak, whose hulking bodies could crush entire fleets with ease, the Fenshera, a race of brilliant scientists whose technology was decades ahead of most others, and the Hadrali, a species known for their immense psychic abilities. But there was one thing that all these species had in common. They all considered humans to be primitive, weak, and far too new to have any influence on galactic affairs. For decades, humans had lived under the radar of the Galactic Alliance, exploring their own corner of the universe, while others made decisions for them. But now, a sudden shift had occurred. A human fleet had risen in strength, pushing back an ancient enemy, the Giraffe, who had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. The humans, though far younger than the rest of the council members, had done something no one thought possible. They had defeated the Giraffe, and in doing so, had claimed victory after victory, becoming the new force to be reckoned with in the galaxy. It was this unexpected rise that had brought them to the attention of the council. The humans, led by their charismatic leader, Admiral Sarah Kincaid, were about to sit at the table for the first time in galactic history. But the council wasn't prepared for what would come next. The alliance was divided. Some saw the humans as a powerful ally, a necessary addition to their forces against the Giraffe, who had shown no sign of slowing down. Others, however, saw the humans as a threat, too unpredictable, too passionate, and too dangerous. But the humans had earned their seat, and now the entire galaxy waited to see what would happen. The council's chamber was a massive, circular room located on a neutral moon that orbited a distant star. Representatives from every major race were seated, each species proud of its power, wisdom, or technology. At the center of the room stood a massive table, a symbol of the power and unity that had held the galaxy together for centuries. It was here, at this very table, that the fate of countless worlds had been decided. And today, it would be decided whether the humans would truly have a place at the table, or if they would be cast aside as an insignificant force, too young and too unpredictable for the delicate balance of the galaxy. Admiral Sarah Kincaid sat in silence as the council members argued. Their voices echoed through the massive chamber, each representative shouting louder than the last. The Urak, who had always believed in brute force, were the first to speak. The humans are a threat. Their leader, General Rakgar, growled. They are too volatile, too emotional. We cannot afford to let them have a say in the council's decisions. We should crush them before they become a problem. We cannot deny their power, countered Fenshera High Counselor Lyra. They have proven themselves capable of defeating the Giraffe. If they are willing to join us in fighting the Giraffe, they could be a valuable ally. We must consider the larger picture here. The room grew silent as a ripple of unease passed through the council. Admiral Kincaid sat calmly at the far end of the table, her hands folded in front of her. She had fought battles that no one thought possible, and she had led her people to victory against insurmountable odds. She knew this moment was a test, not just of her, but of humanity itself. Would they accept humans as equals, or would they treat them as nothing more than a fleeting anomaly? As the voices around the room grew louder, Kincaid stood. The silence fell like a wave, and all eyes turned to her. She was no longer the admiral leading her fleet. Now she was the representative of humanity, standing before an ancient council of beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia. I understand your concerns, Kincaid said, her voice calm but filled with authority. We are new to the galactic stage. We have no centuries of history, no ancient traditions, no long-standing alliances, but we have something that none of you have. We have the will to fight, the desire to survive, and the belief that we are capable of changing the course of history. She paused, letting her words sink in. The silence was thick. The council was waiting, holding its breath. Some of the council members exchanged wary glances, while others simply stared at her, intrigued by the calmness she exuded. We don't claim to be the most powerful species, she continued, but we have already proven that we can take on the impossible. The Giraffe never expected us to defeat them. And yet we did, not because we were stronger, but because we were willing to sacrifice, to adapt, and to fight until the very end. If you want a place for humanity at this table, it's not just because we are strong, but because we are willing to fight for what we believe is right. The room fell into an uncomfortable silence. For the first time, the council members seemed to hesitate. The Iraq and the Hadrali exchanged glances, and even the Fenchara, who had initially supported humanity's inclusion, seemed to pause. It was then that the unexpected happened. A soft voice, one the council had not heard before, broke the silence. It was the voice of a delegate from the Talnar, a species of soft-spoken philosophers who had long remained neutral in galactic affairs. Their leader, Thal, spoke slowly but with conviction. The humans, Thal said, have something that none of us can measure. It's not in their technology, their weapons, or their tactics. It's in their hearts. We have watched them, observed them, and I believe that they are more than just a force of nature. They have something deeper. The giraffe feared them not because they were the strongest, but because they never gave up. They kept pushing, even when there seemed to be no hope. That is the true strength of humanity. A murmur rippled through the room. Kincaid had expected resistance, but she hadn't anticipated this kind of turn. The Talnar were not known for their emotion-driven decisions, yet here they were, offering the new perspective. For the first time, the council began to question their own beliefs. Could they really afford to ignore what Kincaid had just laid out? Could they overlook the strength of human determination, a strength they had never truly understood? As the debate raged on, Kincaid sat in silence, letting the council members debate amongst themselves. She knew this was only the beginning. Humanity's place at the table would not be decided in one meeting, but by the actions they took from this moment on. She had done her part by speaking the truth, but now it was time for the humans to prove their worth through their actions, their choices, and their willingness to stand firm in the face of overwhelming odds. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the council came to a decision. The Iraq had reluctantly agreed to a trial period, giving humanity a seat at the table for 1 year. At the end of the year, the Council would reassess humanity's place within the Galactic Alliance. If humans could prove themselves worthy, they would be allowed to stay. If not, they would be cast aside. Admiral Kincaid stood, her eyes meeting those of every council member. "We accept your decision," she said firmly. "But remember this, no matter what happens, humanity will not be a species that falls silently into the shadows. We will fight, and we will show you what we are capable of. And in the end, it will be humanity who shapes the future of this galaxy." And with that, the first chapter of humanity's involvement in the Galactic Alliance began. It was uncertain, but it was a beginning, one that would change the galaxy forever.